We begin with a Fox News alert on the latest instance of violence against police in America. 2 officers were shot to death Wednesday in Bristol, Connecticut. Another was badly injured. State police say they were lured to an ambush by a fake 911 call. 35-year-old Police Sergeant Dustin Del Monte was a father of 2 with another child on the way. He was a 2019 Officer of the Year, a school resource officer, and an advisor for the Explorer Cadet program. Also killed in the gunfire, 34-year-old Officer Alex Hamzy, a Bristol native who leaves behind a wife. Officer Hamzy was also an advisor to the cadet program. And heartbreakingly, we have another shooting in Raleigh, North Carolina to tell you about, where 5 people have been killed, including an off-duty police officer, 29-year-old Gabriel Torres, after a gunman who was just 15 years old opened fire yesterday along a walking trail, with at least 2 others wounded critically. The suspect was taken into custody and is in critical condition. Before last night's horrific shooting, the Fraternal Order of Police tweeting this: "Since Monday, at least 12 police officers have been shot. The spewing of anti-police rhetoric by some political and media figures, as well as the failed policies of rogue prosecutors and judges, are placing our officers in greater danger. The culture of lawlessness must stop." Pete Hegseth, I don't think anyone could have said it better or more clearly.
You're right, and I could hear the passion in your voice when you were saying it. When you look at those, we've got the faces of those men on the wall right next to us right now. We had one side of the political aisle for years telling the country that those guys right there were the bad guys. They're the bad guys, they're the problem, we need less of them. When you create that type of environment, then certain types of people start to believe that it's okay to dispense with those lives, to challenge them, to tell their kids that they're the bad guys. That's what a culture of lawlessness looks like. So you have the culture nationally, which Democrats and leftists have fostered intentionally after tragedies that occurred. Then you have cultures inside departments. I've had good military leaders and bad military leaders. Right now, we've got scared police departments because of mayors and governors that will throw them under the bus in 10 seconds, which makes every one of their jobs even more difficult and even more dangerous.
And isn't the role, Kennedy, of elected officials, of those figures in our country who are supposed to represent all Americans, isn't their role to quell fomentation, to dispel of rising temperatures, in some way to represent cooling the fire rather than adding onto the fire, which we've been subjected to, as Pete just said, for 2 years now, for over 2 years?
And a lot of those protests that have been taken up by mayors, you know, it's just so they can seem cool. It's so they can pacify the progressive left. But, you know, people who live in cities that have been overrun with crime and homelessness, you look around and, you know, you hope at some point voters go, well, this way is not working. And you're absolutely right, because it is the mayors who are the bridge between the DAs and the police departments. And there is a total disconnect. Police departments feel completely unsupported. Who would want to be a cop right now? And now more than ever, we need good law enforcement officers. We need people who are invested in their communities, who want to keep people safe, and who want their cities to be awesome. And we're not getting that because, you know, the mayors have turned their backs on these police departments, and the DAs are running the show. And guess what? They're running cities into the ground, and it is squarely at their feet.
That's right. And Kaylee, the tragedy upon tragedy is how preventable these deaths are. All of these deaths could have been prevented. Meanwhile, ambushes are up nationally over 300%. Every day we report on the horrific nature of a shooting or a death, and they're not statistics to us. Those are individuals, to their families and to us. There are so many nonprofits dedicated to the families of the fallen, the Detective Rafael Ramos Foundation, Heroes.org, the Troopers United Foundation. How many more have to be founded by widows and these families who have been subjected to what is final? We can't go back. These politicians can go back on their word and say, oh, I've been supporting law enforcement this whole time. But you know what can't be reversed is the loss of a police officer in the line of duty. This is outrageous, and it's unacceptable as Americans.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Not statistics, not numbers. 252 shot, 50 officers killed this year alone by gunfire. That's 50 lives changed. That's 50 families that don't have fathers or mothers or sisters or brothers. And to illustrate how widespread this is, Emily, I know you probably hear about this in your local community, all of us on this couch. I mean, just in the last 3 weeks, a neighboring county to mine, I'm in Hillsborough, Manatee County, so those two neighboring county is Polk County. In Polk County, Florida, I read about a deputy sheriff. His name was Blaine Lane, 21 years old. He goes to serve a felony warrant. It was a woman who had 11 felonies, 4 misdemeanors. Basically, a shootout began because she pointed a gun at these officers, turned out to be a BB gun, and he died of friendly fire, but in a situation that should have never resulted in gunfire. About a week later, another officer, his name was Tony Nunez, same county, shot. But this turned out differently. He had a bulletproof vest on, and the bullet was stopped by the vest and by a St. Michael necklace that he wore every single day to work. These are 2 stories just in my local community, and they're happening nationwide. And Pete, you hit the nail on the head. Why is this happening? For years, we had a political party that perpetuated the anti-cop narrative. It is still, by the way, I know the president says, oh, we're not for defund the police. Well, get Cori Bush in line, who was just asked by George Stephanopoulos if she still supports it. She said, oh, it's not about nomenclature. Yes, essentially is what she said. We support it. So, Mr. President, call your members into the White House, pretty powerful place, look them in the eye and say, done with this. Enough officers have died.
And I have yet, correct me if I'm wrong, to hear from our nation's president or our vice president this week on this tragic statistic. And by the way, the 252, I believe that was from October 4th. It's been 272 shot. And the other thing, Jackie, in addition to everything that my colleagues have said, this fomented culture was absolutely amplified by the mainstream media, by casual displays of pigs in cop uniforms by pro athletes, like Colin Kaepernick. I mean, this was somehow acceptable. ACAB spray painted everywhere. It became acceptable culturally to be so anti-law enforcement, you can be neutral if that's what you choose. But the downright outrageous, violent rhetoric has had real life consequences. And while we can't lay blame in particular people's mouths, rhetoric does matter. Words matter, actions matter, and that is what has led to this current culture and these irretrievable deaths.
Absolutely, and inaction matters too. So when the president stands up and says everything's okay and we're not defunding the police and we don't have a problem in this country, that's also a problem. The Democrats doubling down on defund the police is one issue. The people who are doing nothing is another issue. What do people want in this country? They want to feel safe. They want to be able to send their kids to school, put food on the table, and think that they have a future that's brighter, a little bit than yesterday. And one of those things is being taken away from them right now. Well, several of them are actually, but when it comes to crime, it's being taken away. And when it comes to these officers, nobody wants to be a police officer at this point. Actually, we should be investing in the police. You can still pursue criminal justice reform without completely taking the power away from the police to do their job,
Absolutely.
right? It's coming together and finding the middle ground to be able to make that happen. The problem with this society on so many issues is we've become so extreme, so polarized, so at opposite ends, and really who suffers is you, me, the Americans that are walking on the street that are scared within their communities, and these police officers and their families and their children.
Emily, if I could say one thing I left out, Officer Lane in 5th grade wanted to be a sheriff. That was his lifelong dream, and he lost his life at 21 pursuing that dream. And I just wonder how many little boys and girls think today, I want to be a police officer, when they look at their screens and see what happens. To your point, Jackie, it's tragic.
That's right. And instead we have a president, a commander-in-chief, who says, give me a couple days, man, when someone shouted abolish ICE to him. That's what our commander-in-chief does, instead of standing by those men and women in uniform, instead of encouraging young children to want to serve, to be those heroes in uniform that day in and day out put their lives on the line for our protection. Here on this couch, we are grateful every day, and we mourn the losses of these officers. Our prayers are with their families.